day Adaeze was born, the oldest woman in the village looked at her mother and said, "Bury her now, she will only bring you suffering." Her mother refused. 23 years later, that same old woman was on her knees, begging Adaeze to save her grandson's life. This is Shadow Story, and tonight I want to tell you about a girl that an entire village decided was nothing. Before she had even learned to walk, before she had even learned to speak, before she had even been given a chance to show them who she was. Stay with me, because what this girl did with her pain will silence every single person who has ever been told they are not enough. Adaeze Obi was born in a small village in Anambra State, Nigeria, in the middle of a heavy rainstorm. Her mother, Chisholm, labored for 14 hours before Adaeze finally arrived. The rain did not stop for 3 days after her birth. In the village, rain that does not stop is not a blessing. It is a sign. Mama Nkeki, the oldest and most feared woman in the community, stood at Chisholm's door on the 3rd day. She looked at the baby in Chisholm's arms. She looked at the rain still falling outside, and she said what she said. "This child came with water. She will drown everything you have built. Bury her now while the pain is still small, or spend the rest of your life wishing you had." Chisholm held her daughter tighter and said nothing. She closed the door, and that was the beginning of everything. For the first 9 years of Adaeze's life, things were not easy, but they were whole. Her father, Chukwuemeka Obi, was a quiet and hard-working man. He farmed, he traded. He was not rich, but he was present. Every evening he sat outside their small house and listened to Adaeze talk. She talked about everything, about the clouds, about the market women, about the books her teacher had given her. Her father called her his small professor. He said she had a mind like a river, always moving, always finding its way through. On a Tuesday morning in March, when Adaeze was 9 years old, her father did not wake up. He had gone to sleep the night before complaining of a headache. He did not wake up. The village came, not to comfort Chisholm, not to hold Adaeze. They came to talk. They came to decide. And what they decided was this: Chukwuemeka's death was not natural. It was the child who came in the rain, the child Mama Nkeki had warned them about. She stood at the compound entrance on the day of the burial and spoke loud enough for Adaeze to hear every word. "I told her mother 9 years ago. This child carries death in her hands. Now you have all seen it with your own eyes." Adaeze was 9 years old. She stood beside her father's grave in a dress that was too big for her, and she heard every single word. "Mama, why are they saying that?" "Because they are afraid, my love." "Afraid of what?" "Afraid of things they cannot explain. So they find something to blame." "Am I the thing they are blaming?" Chisholm did not answer immediately. She took her daughter's hand and held it very tightly. "You are not a curse, Adaeze. You are my miracle. And I will spend every day of my life making sure you know that." The weeks after the burial were the darkest Chisholm had ever known. The farm still needed tending. The children of the village still pointed at Adaeze and whispered when she walked past. Her father's brother, Emeka, arrived from the city 3 weeks after the burial. He wore a suit that was too tight and shoes that were too shiny for a village road. He sat in Chisholm's parlor, and he spoke without looking at her. "The land belongs to the family now. Chisholm, you know our tradition. A woman cannot hold land in this family. I am taking the farm. You can stay in the house for now, but the farm is mine." Chisholm sat very still. She looked at her brother-in-law for a long time, and then she said, "God is watching you, Emeka." He looked away. He took the farm. If you are watching Shadow Story for the first time tonight, and this story already has you feeling something deep in your chest, hit that subscribe button right now. Every week we bring you stories like this. Stories of real pain, real sacrifice, real triumph. You do not want to miss a single one. Now, let us go back to Chisholm, because what this woman did next is the real heart of this story. Without the farm, Chisholm had nothing. She had a house with a leaking roof, a daughter who needed to eat, and hands that were willing to work. So she worked. She woke before the sun every morning and cut firewood from the bush at the edge of the village. She carried it on her head to the market and sold it. On the days firewood was not enough, she washed clothes for the families who had more than she did, including the family of Mama Nkeki. She washed that woman's clothes and folded them neatly, and collected her small payment and said thank you. And she came home and made sure Adaeze had eaten before she herself touched a single grain of food. There were evenings when Adaeze came home from school and found her mother sitting in the dark because there was no kerosene for the lamp. She would sit beside her mother in the dark and they would talk. Adaeze would tell her mother what she had learned that day. "Mama, do you know that the heart pumps blood to every part of the body?" "Is that so?" "Yes. Mr. Okonkwo explained it today. He said the heart never rests. Not even when you are sleeping. It just keeps going." Chisholm smiled in the darkness. "Like somebody I know," she said. Adaeze laughed. It was the only light in the room. Mr. Emmanuel Okonkwo had been teaching in that village school for 22 years. He had seen many children come and go. Bright ones, dull ones, ones who disappeared before they could finish. But in 22 years he had never seen a child quite like Adaeze. She read everything she could find. She asked questions that made him stop and think before answering. And she had something that he had learned over 22 years could not be taught. She had hunger. Not the hunger of an empty stomach, though she knew that too. The hunger of a mind that refuses to stay small. He called Chisholm to the school one afternoon in Adaeze's 3rd year. He sat across from her and he spoke plainly. "Mrs. Obi, your daughter is exceptional. I do not say that to every parent. I am saying it to you because I mean it, and because what I am about to tell you matters. There is a scholarship examination in the state capital next month. For secondary school, full scholarship, boarding, everything paid." Chisholm looked at him. "The journey to the capital alone will cost money I do not have." "I know," he said. "I will pay for the journey." Chisholm shook her head. "I cannot allow you to do that." He leaned forward. "Mrs. Obi, I have been a teacher for 22 years. A man invests in what he believes in. I believe in your daughter. Please, let me do this." Adaeze sat the examination. She did not get the scholarship. She missed it by 4 marks. 4 marks. The village heard the news before Chisholm and Adaeze had even returned home. By the time they walked through the village that evening, Mama Nkeki was already sitting outside with 3 other women. She did not shout. She did not need to. She simply watched Adaeze walk past and she said quietly to the women beside her, "Some things are just not meant to be." Adaeze heard it. She kept walking. She did not cry until she was inside the house with the door closed. She sat on the floor and she cried the way a child cries when the world has confirmed its worst opinion of her. Chisholm sat on the floor beside her. She did not tell her to stop crying. She did not tell her it would be okay. She just sat there on the floor beside her daughter and waited. When the crying slowed, she spoke. "What, Mama? How many marks did you miss it by?" "So you almost had it." "Almost is not enough, Mama. Almost means you were close enough to touch it. Almost means you know the way. All you have to do now is go back." Adaeze looked at her mother. "You are not disappointed in me." Chisholm looked at her daughter as if the question itself was the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. "Disappointed in you. Adaeze, the day you were born, I held you in my arms and I made a promise to your father and to God. I said this child will know that she is loved no matter what happens. 4 marks on an examination will never change that promise. You hear me? Adaeze nodded. Now sleep, Chisholm said. Tomorrow we begin again. She sat the examination a second time the following year. She got the scholarship. Full marks in science and mathematics. The highest score in her local government area. Mr. Okonkwo wept when he heard the results. He was not ashamed of it. Chisholm stood in their small house and held the letter and read it 3 times. Then she went outside, looked up at the sky, and said simply, "Thank you." The women of the village said nothing. Not congratulations. Not well done. Adaeze noticed, and she carried that silence with her all the way to the capital. She used it as fuel. Secondary school was the first time Adaeze understood what she was truly capable of. Away from the village, away from the whispers, away from the weight of being the girl the village had decided was cursed. She was just a student. And, as just a student, she was extraordinary. She topped her class every single year. She won competitions. She won awards. She wrote letters home to her mother every 2 weeks without fail. "Mama, they say I am the best student in the school." "I told you," Chisholm wrote back. "I told you from the beginning." After secondary school came university. University of Nigeria and Nsukka. It was the hardest thing she had ever attempted. The hours were brutal. The work was relentless. The pressure was unlike anything she had known. There were nights she called her mother in tears. "Mama, I do not know if I can do this." And Chisholm's voice would come through the phone, steady and warm and completely certain. "You can." "How do you know?" "Because I know you, Adaeze. I have known you since, before you could speak. And I am telling you, you can." She did it. 6 years. She did it. Dr. Adaeze Obi, the first doctor this village had ever produced. On the day Adaeze returned to the village for the first time as a doctor, she did not arrive with noise. She did not come to prove anything to anyone. She came because her mother was there. And wherever her mother was, that was still home. Chisholm stood at the entrance of their small house and watched her daughter walk toward her. She did not run. She just stood there with her hands over her mouth and her eyes full. Adaeze walked up to her mother and held her. They stood like that for a long time. Neither of them said anything. They did not need to. The village noticed her return. Of course, they did. A village always notices. The women who had whispered about her as a child now greeted her with wide smiles and loud voices. "Adaeze, my daughter, you have done well. We always knew you would make it. We always believed in you." Adaeze smiled at each of them. She said, "Thank you." She did not remind them of what they had said. She did not need to. Some things live in the memory of the people who said them long after the person they were said about has moved on. Adaeze set up a small clinic at the edge of the village. It was not big, but it was there. And the people came. Old men with aching joints, young mothers with sick babies, children with fevers that had not broken for days. She treated every single one of them. She charged what they could afford. For those who could afford nothing, she charged nothing. 3 months after the clinic opened, a woman came to the door one evening, just as Adaeze was closing. She was being supported by 2 younger women, one on each side. She was old. Her wrapper was expensive, but her face was collapsed with fear. Adaeze looked at the woman being helped through her clinic door. She recognized her immediately. It was Mama Nkeki, the oldest woman in the village. The woman who had stood at her mother's door the day after she was born and said, "Bury her now." The woman who had stood at her father's grave and blamed a 9-year-old child for his death. the woman who had watched Adaeze walk home after failing her first examination and said some things are just not meant to be. That woman, now standing in her clinic, barely able to hold herself upright. "My grandson," Mama Nkeki said. Her voice was different from the voice Adaeze remembered. The authority was gone. What was left was just an old woman who was afraid. "My grandson has had a fever for 4 days. The hospital in town said they cannot see him until next week." She stopped. She looked at Adaeze. And then, slowly, with great difficulty, Mama Nkeki lowered herself to her knees on the floor of the clinic. "Please," she said again, "I know what I said about you. I have known for a long time that I was wrong. Please help my grandson." The room was completely silent. The 2 women who had helped Mama Nkeki inside stood frozen. Adaeze looked at the old woman on her knees for a long moment. Then she stepped forward. She reached down and took Mama Nkeki's hands and helped her to her feet. "Get up, Mama Nkeki," she said gently. "Where is the boy?" They brought the child in. He was 7 years old, small for his age, burning with fever, his breathing shallow and fast. Adaeze examined him carefully and thoroughly. She gave him medication. She set up a drip. She sat beside him for 2 hours until his breathing steadied and his temperature began to drop. Mama Nkeki sat in the corner of the room the entire time and did not make a sound. When the child finally fell into a calm and easy sleep, Adaeze turned to the old woman. "He will be fine," she said. "Bring him back in 2 days." Mama Nkeki looked at her. "Why?" the old woman said quietly. "After everything I said, why would you help him?" Adaeze was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because he is a child, Mama Nkeki, and no child should suffer for the mistakes of the adults around them. I learned that a long time ago." The old woman nodded. She did not say anything else. She left the clinic with her grandson, sleeping in the arms of one of the younger women. At the door, she stopped. She turned back to look at Adaeze one more time. "Your mother raised something extraordinary," she said. And then she was gone. Adaeze stood alone in her clinic for a long moment after they left. Then she picked up her phone and called her mother. "Yes, my love, I want to tell you something." "Tell me." "I want to tell you that everything you did, every piece of firewood you carried, every cloth you washed, every night you sat with me in the dark, it was not wasted. None of it was wasted." Chisholm was quiet on the other end of the phone. When she spoke, her voice was very full. "I know, my love. I always knew. That is why I never stopped. If this story has moved you tonight, if you felt Mama Chisholm carrying that firewood, if you felt Adaeze sitting on that floor crying, if this story reminded you of someone you love or someone you are, hit the like button right now and leave a comment below. Tell me, who is your Mama Chisholm? Who is the person in your life who never stopped believing in you, even when everything said they should? Drop their name in the comments and let us celebrate them together. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. Because next week we have another story waiting. And it will hit just as hard as this one. Today, Dr. Adaeze, OB, runs a clinic that serves over 300 patients a month. She has never turned a single patient away for lack of money. She is building a second clinic in the next village. Her mother, Chisholm, sits outside the clinic every morning and greets every patient who arrives. she still calls her daughter her miracle. And in a village where a woman once said, "Bury her now," children grow up hearing a different story. They grow up hearing the story of the girl the village gave up on, who never gave up on the village. There is a version of Adaeze's story where her mother believed what they said, where she let the words of fearful people decide the destiny of her child, where Adaeze grew up knowing only what the world thought of her, and nothing of what she was truly capable of. That version does not exist, because one woman refused. One tired, hungry, firewood, carrying, cloth, washing, floor, sitting woman looked at her daughter in the darkness and said, "You are not a curse. You are my miracle." And those 6 words were stronger than everything the world threw at them. If you are watching this, and someone has told you that you are not enough, that you are cursed, that you are finished, that you are finished, that your story is already over, I want you to hear this. They were wrong about Adaeze. They are wrong about you. This has been Shadow Story. Subscribe, stay close, and never let anyone bury what God has planted in you.